There we go. Are we live? Yes, we are. Hopefully.
Yeah, we got all of our pre-scheduled tweeting out of the way.
Yeah.
So we should be good, right?
We should be. If anyone in the chat says that we're live, please inform us. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I know there's a few minute delay, but yes. Okay, this week is a very exciting film spectacular week. I'm debating how to say this because you know what I mean? You know when you're like, it's interesting content, but it's like, oh.
Well, I thought what the word teenploitation was probably the best that we could use for this.
Yeah.
You've heard of blaxploitation, but now you've got gay exploitation, exploitation. That's all here. It's all here.
It's all everything except for, well, yeah, even that.
There's a little bit of it.
A little bit of it here and there, but well, especially in Nowhere, the last movie, but we'll get to that. So this week, Digital Archipelago on my channel with Matt, Prudentialist. This week we're covering 3 films that are part of what has been called the Teenage Apocalypse Trilogy. Part of New Line Cinema's, well, it was all produced by New Line Cinema, but they were what they call the new, I have to avoid it, it's not 30 seconds yet. Maybe we've been a minute. The new LGBT cinema of the 1990s. But but please, before you stop, before you turn this off, please, there's a lot of unintentional red pills going on in these films. A lot of them. So before you turn off, please, God, please. It's amazing. The films, while they're not great, they're real, like, trashy.
Well, no, the first one was literally him, a PA, and no union camera work, in the cast. So
yeah. Oh my God.
Great cinema is a subjective term around here in these parts, but yeah.
Can you imagine Devin Stack reviewing these films?
Oh God, he'd excoriate them with like a thesis master's, defense, basically, is what I'd expect.
It'd have to be an Odyssey exclusive, though.
Yeah, because we're gonna do this as diplomatically as possible.
Exactly.
Because if it were not for doing this show, I don't think I would have ever known who Gregg Araki was or any of these films. But then again, I would have never known how James Duval got his start. So
exactly, yeah.
Here we go.
Here we go. So I think, like, the reason we're doing this is I feel that this was an important time in history and has a lot of parallels to our own timeline, and it has a lot of deeper themes, believe it or not, that I feel is in some ways unintentionally giving away, like, the sort of trajectory of the way society was going to go for, the foreseeable future. And this was from the early to mid 90s. So all 3 films, they're made in the time span of throughout, I believe, the early to middle 90s.
Yeah, it goes from 93 to 97. So you're in a 4-year time span. We get 3 really, I would say, really prophetic films in a lot of way. Like, this was really a sign of where culture was going to go. And we can say a lot. Well, maybe not too, I don't know too much where I could say, like, totally effed up, but that's the first film. I'm trying not to swear. That one's more LGBT focused, but the Doom Generation, I think, really does speak a lot to coming out of the 1980s satanic panic AIDS crisis, and then into the new millennium. And a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, it's all there, and it's all still with us, for better or for worse.
Definitely for worse. But what's funny is that the films are surprisingly self-critical, because you could get away with stuff back in the day before, like, the ideology was cemented, like the messaging at least. So you could get away with quite a bit of, like, unintentional red pills. But what's interesting is that I will compliment Gregg Araki for completing such a stark artistic vision in film, which is incredibly difficult compared to other artistic mediums to complete in terms of a trilogy, in terms of a triptych of different films that may be like, and it is total postmodern cinema. It's very nonlinear. they always end in aporia, more or less. It seems like these films don't go anywhere in particular, especially the first one, totally effed up. But before that, let's get to shilling time. It's just shilling time. Sorry, that was from a Head P song called K Word Time. I'm trying to be K Ill Time. So maybe I'll go first. Yes, I just have amazing content week. Just released yesterday the Content Minded episode 14 with Will Wheelwright and Michael Thomas of Sharon. We're talking about the Catholic Back to the Land movement. Go and see that. I have in the description, I have a new buy me a coffee for one-time donations, because I also have a PayPal for one-time donations. But of course, always go to patreon.com. This week's Janet Reviews is delayed because last week was my father. Last Saturday and Sunday was my father's birthday, and I was busy. I had other stuff I had editing to do. So I will come out with the episode either tonight or tomorrow. So for my patrons that are listening, so don't worry about it. I have a new Buy Me a Coffee. I also have amazing episode. Go to my community tab. Maybe I'll link in the description. The War Report episode with my good friend Goran GSP and his co-host Constantine Martelli, where we talk about the legacy and the significance of the exiting of the American empire from Afghanistan. And I go into, there's a lot of spicy bits as well in there too. I talk about, I think Prude, you tweeted about, or no, you didn't tweet about, I think you tweeted about this, but I saw on your Telegram before we went live, the comments by General David betray us. So I talked a little bit about that, about why that term came about from the MoveOn.org article, the ads, David betray us. And also my copy of the Passage Prize came out. I got this for free because I'm a judge. So shout out to my boy Lomez. Lomez will be on Content Minded. But of course he's got to use a vocoder, a voice changer. So this is just amazing. Let me find some non-Fed posty content. Let me go to the wide. This is a spread from the Zach Brown, the second winner of the one I chose for the Passage Prize. Well, it was a committee choice, but he was winner number 2, second place for the Passage Prize. And of course, my good friend, let me find Wide Dog. Where's Wide Dog? My good friend Wide Dog. Oh, here's some King Salmon. No, I can't show that. I just, I'm sorry, King Salmonfish. Listen, I know your artwork is, no, that has a spinning wheel. I can't show that. Can't show that one. Let me find Wide Dog's one. Oh God. But yeah, so please, I think that here he goes. This is some of the Wide Dog pieces. This Very is good. From Memories of a Golden Future, his series. I know they're $400. Look at that, just smacking it down. I know they're $400. I think they sold out though from a print run of about, I want to say 200. So please, I think though they're going to print more. So if you want, please, if you have $400 burning a hole in your pocket, go and support Passage Prize. Me and Lomez are talking about some other things which I can't mention because it's not concrete, but it's to pertain to my Patreon goal of writing a book. So keep in mind next year, we'll see what happens. So Prudentialist, what do you have up for the shilling before we go into these amazing, riveting amazing auteur cinema, these total Kino and Nectar? Oh, by the way, I'm also I will be in talks with Kino Corner to do an episode with him on Content Mind. So there you go. Go ahead. Sorry, I cut you. You're amazing fine. Kino cinema.
Well, taste is subjective. Well, ladies and gents, so tomorrow I will have another episode of Real Talk for you. So more fishing out. We finally got some rain, so the footage I recorded today was very nice. It's nice. Finally not feeling like it's 110 degrees, not in the 40s, as for our friends in Celsius. After that, the Sunday will be going over, industrial warfare and globalization. I had to put it off from last Sunday because my spiritual father, our priest, is departing from our parish. He's moving, so we'll be getting a new one soon. So I just took the time Sunday to just spend more time there at church rather than have our show. But after that, I will have a reading sort of recording for video for you guys from my IM 1776 article. I'm going to be pretty light next week. I'm going to be helping take care of a friend while she's in surgery. So I'll be doing with that. But I'll have some writing out for sure. And as for things that are lying ahead in the future, I did buy something a little spicy from Apostate Gallery. And we'll have some exclusive... I'm going to put that behind the paywall for sure. But let's just say I bought Mr. Roger his work.
Saint Elliot, peace be upon him.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I know. I should.
I don't think.
I don't
think.
say that.
But anyways, that'll probably be behind the paywall for sure. So more stuff to come. But next week will be pretty light. But don't worry, I've got stuff lined up for you guys.
I wonder how Parallax Optics I wonder how they secured the rights to publish.
I'm curious because it's a very they publish it in such a way that's very well done. It's in a book form and everything.
Yeah. Oh my god. So next week there might not be an episode of Digital Archipelago, but maybe we could pre-record. So I don't know.
Yeah, I might have some time. I'll let you know.
And next week on Content Minded, I believe I'm going to release the Forrest episode. He's a great Twitter personality, great poster. And I believe in 2 weeks from now, I might release the Gifts Ungiven episode. So we'll see what happens. So right off the bat, first film in the series. This is 1993. Totally effed up. Gregg Araki's not his film debut, but certainly one of his major films in terms of they're becoming a cult classic within what they call the new queer cinema, queer in the academic term, new LGBT cinema. And it really is a nonlinear narrative. It follows, it's basically, okay, you know how we talk about the Redditors of a certain ilk, how they have the squat houses, the anarchist squat houses. It's essentially six gay guys and 2 lesbians living in a house together. Yeah. And it's like a mockumentary style where they have like these video logs where they're talking about themselves and so forth. And it's done in a way as to be half like mockumentary and half film. So it's got that experimental, postmodern, nonlinear film quality to it. But this is the first film in the series. This is yeah, you go ahead. What was your first impressions?
It felt sort of like a mock-up of a lot of 90s MTV era shows of like people living in an apartment together and trying. The names of those shows escape me. This is not of my time nor of the sort of stuff that I normally watch. But it's done in like 15 vignettes. It's not. There is somewhat of a story to it, but there really isn't. And it's all these different takes about their lifestyle, what they do, the things that they encounter, things behind a camera, the way that they take care of themselves, not just in like a physically intimate sense, but also just because like they have to work, they deal with parents that are, not for them. And I mean, this is in 1993. So like, you're just coming out of things like the Satanic Panic. You're coming out of really the height of the HIV/AIDS crisis where, I mean, even in the movie, it does show how, PSAs about how AIDS kills and things like that, which at the time, still very much a death sentence. And, they're just trying to manage their life. And it's very much the kind of discourse that you would hear today about quite a few things where, there's just like, oh, this disease that really only attracts like needle users and, those who aren't straight. It's just like, it seems like a televangelist, born again Republican wet dream. And it's just a lot of the sort of and I mean, these were all actors. This wasn't just like they picked up 6, gays and lesbians off of the street to film them. I know there are other movies that have done that, but it was an interesting series of vignettes looking at things like coming out, intimacy, and how that operates. The only thing that felt remotely unbelievable is that the lesbians and the gays would get along as well as they did in the movie. But,
yeah, that's true. No, there was a time though, I think because of the AIDS crisis, where they said that the lesbians, they sort of were helping like with tertiary care of AIDS victims back in, But in California, it's a very California specific thing.
Oh yeah,
I
mean the 405 gets mentioned. There are numerous LA shots where it's like late night or early 1990s LA skyline where it's so hazy and dirty, and they're just like, yeah, this is our life, and they're sort of in like that's kind of squatters squalor, but in various different houses throughout the film, whether they're at their family or a place that they own or a place that they're squatting in, as they try and just make do with relationships and stuff like that.
Yeah, and what's very interesting is that there's a number of the film, all three films, they're basically meant to denote the sort of on a post-apocalyptic or an apocalyptic vibe or a pre-apocalyptic vibe where society is basically collapsing. There's always the looming threat. I mean, there is this one YouTuber that did the only review I could find on YouTube was this one particular.
You can find the whole film on YouTube. That's where I watched it.
Yeah. This one trans YouTuber talking about the Doom generation. But no, there's a looming. I know. There's a looming threat of like the outside and like homophobia and G-word bashers. Well, they used to call them F-slur bashers back in the day. And there's also...
Don't worry, they make an appearance in the other movies.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And this one as well, because one of the gay men gets beaten up by a group of them after they... And don't tell me how I know who this person is, okay? I mean nothing by it. But it played a speech on television, which I can't believe in California they would play this, even back then. A speech by J.B. Stoner, who was a member of a certain group with hoods back in the day, who ran for, like, I believe either Senate or governor in Georgia. And the only reason I know about this guy is because he was on Wally George's hot seat back in the day. And you can, like, only find the clip on BitChute. And he's like, and Wally George's like absolutely, like, as a Reaganite, he's like absolutely disgusted at his like incredibly like racist, homophobic politics. And so this guy was a member of the certain hooded people. And they played and so throughout each film, what's very interesting is there's banners and advertisements everywhere with messages of the end time. One of them, in totally effed up, was what does it say here in my notes? The lifestyles of the bored and disenfranchised. The end is near. AIDS, to who dead, right? I believe that they even knew about the A. Wyatt Mann comic back in the day. It very much follows this. I'm like, don't get me wrong. They're incredibly nihilistic films because they're following around teenage wastos around California and sort of like following on the underdregs of society. But each film progressively gets more higher budget. So by the time you get to the last film, which is Nowhere, you get this like every single youth trope of the MTV generation, every like hyper fabulized, kitschy teensploitation schlock, right down to the industrial and grunge and Riot Girl soundtrack to like the semi-Baz Luhrmann, like Romeo plus Juliet set design, like the aesthetic.
Oh yeah,
of, like,
I mean it's hyper surreal in that instance where it's just
there's an alien abducting and eating people.
I mean there's every 901 or every 90120, or I don't know what the zip code is. What every trope of that MTV show is there in all three of these films. Even in this one where it's sort of like straight out of something Matthew Fox would have done. But now it's just like more focused on, it's
like the real life.
Yeah, the real life, but it's the real gay life of the 1990s. And, it's the coming, like, they're all, it's an incredibly nihilistic film. All this nihilism is still here. I feel like, what was this, like, 1993? So, people that were just coming of age in the 1990s and those that can remember it. So, like, really late Gen X, maybe early millennial, this sort of stuff coming in here. Where, that nihilism hasn't left us in the almost 30 years since that film has come out. And the thing that kind of stuck out me the most is like in each of these vignettes, it's about different problems, whether it's like intimacy issues, about like what, like it's sort of like the porn brain is definitely already there, where like one of the couples is complaining about not wanting to do things because the camera has to be on at all times. Others just, there was one of the vignette clips where it's like, it's my party, and then things like, I'll inseminate if I want to, playing off the trope of, it's my birthday and I'll cry if I want to. Yeah. And they're just complaining about like, heterosexuality is boring, and your basic sort of like mental, I would say, just the things that one would sell to themselves in this like exclusive minority community. And it was just funny because like I went to go see Elvis not too long ago.
Oh yeah.
And
they're canceling Elvis right now, by the way.
Oh, are they now? Okay.
They're appropriating black musicians.
Well, I mean, they made that clear as day in that movie. I mean, geez Louise. But I mean, the thing that I had the most complaint about, and this is why I just like the fact that I can torrent or like find movies on streaming these days, is that I don't have to sit in a movie theater where, like I'm sitting in this movie theater and it's a bunch of boomers that want to see Elvis.
Obviously.
First movie trailer that comes out is this film called Bros, which is this it's all gays. And it's about, this like gay couple trying to get together. One's like really like your kitsch sort of, feminine style. And the other one is like a much more hyper masculine bro as the film goes. But like the film opens up with all these like this like pride center or like gay history thing in California. They're all, or it's in New York, and they're all arguing over their own sort of tendencies. And then just like, the straights had their time, that was fun while it lasted. It's like, you can hear that attitude dripping from this film as well. Totally effed up. It's definitely something there.
But I think I would challenge it though. I think that totally effed up. It was more of an honest depiction, because I think that in some ways, especially how the film ends, it sort of highlights the weird insular nature of these fringe communities. I mean, very much still was a fringe at the time in 1993, although it was being more popularly, normalized. And I think that it gives some kind of like really honest, like Gregg Araki, like he gives a very honest picture into the destitution. Of course, like half of it is blaming external forces like, homophobia and xenophobia and so forth. But the other half is kind of like there's an inability to achieve true intimacy among them. There's even, what was really funny is that there was the one video vlog thing by the lesbian couple where the one, she's going actually into like explicating Spandrel's IQ shredder about how like all the dumb people are having kids and all the cool people are not having kids. But it's funny because there is a lot of pure onanism and sterility here purposefully, because they are kind of living in the end times in a lot of ways, like the way that all these signs and all of these motifs are affirming that. But also like there's this one scene where the two guys, instead of going at each other, they're looking at a prawn film. And it very much is, you don't have a lot of gratuitous sex in this film. I notice there is almost an inability to achieve intimacy there, which I find fascinating. Whereas I think if you watch like a LGBT film like this Bro one today, it's like total triumphalism. There's no tact. There's no self-reflection. There's only like, the message.
Yeah, I mean, this felt more like a confession rather than perhaps, what we see today, where like, the subject of like bed death is definitely talked about, where like there's a whole bit about what they want to do in the bedroom. And he's just like, well, I don't want to do that. He's like, well, maybe I should just leave. He's like, yeah, maybe you should. To where like it's almost like, oh, who had this? Someone on Twitter had a good take about this. I think it was Billy Pratt, where he was just like, when sex becomes your whole personality, like you'll go to all the ends of the earth to accomplish it. And and that's kind of what it felt like here, where it's just like it was a very rather in-depth look at what these things are, like, relationship issues. How do you communicate your needs to someone? And like he's venting to one of the lesbians in the film, where it's just like, well, he doesn't do the things that I want. She's like, well, you need to be more forceful about it. And it's just like a very realistic look at the but also the nihilism of it, because like when you're basing, like the film really itself is based around identity and then your own desires. And so when your own desires aren't being accomplished or achieved, like you sort of achieve that sort of coon brain nihilistic outlook where like, well, then what else is there to do, or what else is there to live for? And it's also, this sort of in the back of your mind, you talk about the end times, but it's also like the end of an era right? Like they're just coming out of the satanic panic and AIDS crisis, but they're also just coming out of the fact that like the end of the millennia is like right there, right before
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. To quote the band Sanctuary, was the 80s just a time of spoiled innocence now that the new millennium is here? I think that's very great observation. I think that it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have the same messaging because this was pre trying to um the sort of the way that the civil rights movement became complicated in the 1990s, because you started to feel what Baudrillard called the like after the orgy push of like pure exhaustion, and subversion really wasn't what it used to be. And the fact that it was still before they tried to like totally like, normalize everything and put it as like, this is the new chic thing. It allowed for a space for that confessional. And here's the thing, I'm gonna get the trads pissed off at this, but I do think that some of it is warranted. I do think that people, as much as I've come harshly critical of things like Soft White Underbelly, I do think that there should be, in a way, an honest depiction of certain things, either through the medium of the work of art or cinema or literature, of these, precariat groups. And I do think that, the one YouTube reviewer that reviewed Doom Generation, which we're going to cover next, said like, well, there's always that looming threat of fascism and gay bashing and blah, blah, blah. But like, really, yes, that's true. But at the same time, it's like, it's still depicting largely young, largely sexually ambiguous youths in a state of decay. So that in itself, it's like,
I mean, all three of these films are set in a place of decay. Like, not a single one of these things is done in sunny, shiny suburbia. It's done in, like shady movie theaters or, malls that are beginning to slowly empty out. Like, it is just not in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, it's all post-industrial. And this is, in the backdrop, right, of the 1990s about like the World Trade Organization protests, like NAFTA. Like there is this undercurrent of like things are only just starting to get bad and things have not yet accomplished any sort of like strategic victory. And I mean, this is at a time, right, where like for like homosexuality in media, at least in television, right? Because I mean, this is clearly like a trope of like, a lot of MTV shows and just people living together, almost like a gay Big Brother in a way, right? But without the competition or voting people off. And there is this sense of, well, you've just kind of like, you're in the end times, this waste zone where there's still a lot of public service announcements about HIV. There's still all sorts of ways about, how it affects everybody. It's safe. And this is at a time when in media, really the biggest culture, this is before Will and Grace. And the last big thing I was going to mention Will and Grace. I was about to say, like, the thing that really had it out there that was, really big on like homosexuality, at least that I can think of off the top of my head, was like Three's Company. And that's played for laughs, a straight guy playing as gay in order to, be in a single sex apartment complex with two women. So, I mean, this is definitely a more intimate look and it feels very confessional. Where like these are what these groups actually do go through, which is, someone's dad beating the living crap out of them for coming out, or just the simple fact that, these relationships do really depend on, like one of the characters says it. So he's like, I fall in love every 5 minutes. Or, the best part about living on hell on earth is like 5 seconds of bliss that comes with, sexual release.
Oh my God. Oh, that's so, again, like the Billy Pratt quote, like that's brutal.
That's why I was like, this is a really confessional film. And you don't get a lot of those these days where everything is very highly romantic or done in ways that I think are more palatable to a wider audience. But I mean, like if you look up how this film was made, it's like him behind the camera. It's literally Araki behind the camera directing, one PA guy, these actors, and all of it was done without license or union approval for anything. And so just very grunge, very underground. And in essence,
95 almost.
And it's just definitely far more realistic, I think, than what you see in a lot of places.
Oh yeah.
In today's movie
Modern
cinema,
Family.
Modern
Yeah.
Family. I mean, none of that stuff gets talked about in depth like this film does it, which is why it's like a really brutally honest confessional.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it a lo-fi horror? No.
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 Well, maybe.
Maybe. What was one last thing is that what's very interesting is that throughout the film um they're playing like they're like the one time they're together, and I forget which park there is there in LA. I know that Venice Beach comes up in nowhere. Where they're playing they're reading this like no, I'm not gonna say it. Like, incredibly hair-raising like anti-gay screed by some preacher. And there's
Yeah,
always
but it's in the newspaper.
yeah, but it's in the newspaper, exactly. Which for like realistically, I think even in '93 they probably would have kayfabe that. They wouldn't have, maybe if you read like I don't know if you were in certain parts of America, certainly, because there is like this very heavy like almost American Gothic like end times preacher, talking
The
about
end is nigh,
yeah, the degeneracy of society is dooming us
everything is
to
Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah, I mean, like everything that
fire
they
and
were.
brimstone.
I mean, they were reading that, I mean, there are probably some newspapers out in the middle of nowhere America that could still get away with publishing that, but I
Oh,
can't
yeah,
imagine
yeah.
post Reagan California ever being like that at all. But
No, but
I mean,
yeah.
California elected Bill Clinton for God's sake. I mean, even then, right? It's different
Oh,
back then,
did
but
they elect Bill
I'm
Clinton?
pretty sure. Not, I'd have to double check. Some chat can
Yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean,
yeah.
this was at a time when like the politics of the area was definitely changing. I don't think that, but maybe. I mean, right? This is still an era of like Donahue, and
Yeah.
a lot of the shock jock stuff is still out there. This is when Rush Limbaugh is really beginning to rise meteorically, and so maybe,
Well,
but
in California, they had Wally George. They had
yeah.
like the shot, like Wally George, hot seat. Go to YouTube after this and watch some Wally George. It's like if you take, it's like if you were to take Jerry Springer and combine him with Bill O'Reilly. That's
Well,
what.
that's why I like Morton Downey Jr. so much,
Yeah,
is for
yeah,
that.
yeah,
But I'll have to look up Wally George.
yeah. He hated Morton Downey Jr. famously, and he had him on, and they started like imagine like two of like conservative like trash TV pundits like going at it. It was hilarious. But there was this one line before we go to the end of the film where the African American gay gentleman, the only one of the only African Americans in this, said something about how he actually he likes how things are not quote unquote like the old days in terms of gay culture, meaning in the 1980s and the 70s and 80s. He sort of said, and it alludes to, I think, what was the positive aspects of the new queer cinema in the 90s, where it sort of opened up that space for the confessional. It opened up the space for LGBT, youths to have like
There
sort
was
of
no coded language.
exact. There's no coded language, but there was also, I think, a different expression of their own gayness as opposed to the 1970s and 80s, where it very much was the bathhouse machismo. And he even says the words like,
He says cruising, like that gets
yeah,
mentioned a lot.
fisting and yeah, yeah. And so he's like saying that maybe it's better nowadays that we don't have like these older, like ultra hair raising affectations of which there still is, by the way. That there was that one thread on Twitter about I can't say on YouTube, the current biosecurity thing that's going around. You know, the pit. No, never mind. No, never mind. Never. Twitter had to delete it, by the way.
Things the dogs can get, apparently, we'll say that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but the end of the film, James Duvall's character, and heroes sunsets by drinking a cocktail of chemicals and going into a pool. And really, the film ends up kind of even nihilistically. It's really it very much was it probably was a lead up to Doom Generation, but it very much was like an ending that isn't satisfying in any regard, I think.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think there is a lot of alt media that isn't just explicitly like queer cinema. There's a lot of media in the 1990s that focuses on youth that wasn't always like, I mean, even mainstream stuff. I mean, even the most worst, like the worst kind of depictions of just like middle American lifestyle, like American Beauty and other products of like the late 90s, early 2000s, like that whole decade really does illustrate, I think,
Pleasantville.
a lot of Pleasantville, right? Like all these films are trying to depict the nihilism of middle America when there are so many other problems that are going on in the backdrop that you're supposed to just accept and not be able to do anything about it. Which, I mean, writ large, there is a lot of things that you can't do about it. I mean, despite the massive protests in Seattle, I mean, there's a really great like docudrama film about that. I think it is called War in Seattle. It's really good. And but I mean, despite all that, right, like you're now coming to a rapidly different era where it's not just you turn on Oprah or Donahue and listen to like the televangelist or the home shopping channel, although that does come up on this movie on the TV where they're looking at diamonds and stuff. And it's like, well, you know, it's post-industrial, it's grungy. I mean, this is at a time where even this isn't where grunge isn't even a thing, but like the culture at the time is really a reflection of nihilism, and it does cover not just like the mainstream will cover, I think, a lot of the sort of straight nihilism there, but also at the same time, right? There's also the same thing with like, it was also like very diverse for this film of like, I mean, it's mainly white, but you have one, I think he's Asian or Hispanic, and one black guy. And I mean, for that, I mean, it was just a very interesting cross section at a time before really intersectional thinking was everywhere. Because I mean, what comes as a big civil rights push in the 1990s? It was the ADA, and then you started creeping your way closer and closer and closer. I wonder if that is the case, Gio. Was that why we were watching these movies?
Oh, maybe. I mean, she was looking pretty smoking back.
Oh, she was, absolutely stunning. In
this similar to Art Linkletter, Slackers, exactly.
Yeah.
But, and it's funny because in Nowhere, the chick from not what's her name, the main one from American Beauty. What's her name? Oh God, I forget her name. But the other one, the hot one that you know, that Kevin Spacey's character wanted. She's also in Nowhere. But anyways, no, that's a great take actually. So, and I think like the fact that it does play with like the postmodern cinema technique of using the text as a way of framing narrative directly. Because in all three films, text creeps up everywhere. Booming messages. This is the end. I don't care anymore. Like you name it. Like So I'm just reading the comments. By the way, Sneed those super chats. Super chats are enabled. You cheap. Never mind. Please give me your money or a manual typewriter. Your only hope for the future.
I was watching a documentary about him actually, about targeted individuals, about Francis E. Deck, and I would love to cover his rants one of these days. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, well, we could do that next episode.
Yeah, just, the more I read them, I'm just like, you know.
Yeah, I did a whole Theory Cell episode with Jeffrey Schollenberger on Outsider Theory.
Awesome.
Let me link it. Actually, let me find it. I'm actually in the process of going through all of my different podcast appearances and like putting them in like one Substack article, like an archive.
Yeah,
I know ZHP did that, but I think it would probably be easier on my link tree to do that. Let me look up. This is bothering me. I can't believe I forgot her name. Apparently American Beauty's been viciously canceled nowadays. Do you know that, Brood?
Like I didn't know. I mean,
Thora Birch. That's who I'm referring to. Thora Birch.
Yeah, Thora Birch.
American Beauty. It's not woke enough. It's not acceptable. It doesn't treat homosexuality with a proper tact. It's filled with tropes of 90s youth culture that is very problematic, very white. Can't have that, you know? So American Beauty was like this subversive piece of celluloid, kind of like Pleasantville, not as bad as Pleasantville, but nowadays, by the standards of current wokeness, totally canceled. So, there's this big, long Huffington Post article about it.
I did not know. I mean, But it's okay. Pleasantville and Deliverance are still totally acceptable. So I mean,
yeah.
Heaven forbid the actual predator Kevin Spacey in a film acting like a predator. Heaven forbid we cancel that. It's just it's nuts. But no, I didn't know that they were after or canceling that. But yeah, I mean,
they say it's clunky, it's out of depth, it's not like proper,
Oh, it's out of depth. You don't want to watch a video of a plastic bag flying in the air for the last final shot.
I gotta admit, though, I'm a sucker for American Beauty. I love that '90s cinema, man. Like even Nowhere gave me nostalgia for the MTV generation. Man.
I mean, but the one thing is subversive as that film is, and others like it, is that there is just this sort of unending nihilism that does exist with sort of suburban culture.
Yeah, and even like the end of Nowhere, which we'll get to, ends on a very Kafkaesque note. By the way, we'll get to it. But I wonder, though, it's sort of like nowadays how people talk about, like, to go after the trad larpers, they'll talk about the 1950s. Like that meme of like, I'm secretly, I'm on meth and I'm on this and blah blah blah. Like, that
I'm secretly gay. Yeah, but I mean, it's all, and I talked about that in the IM article where it was just like how many people get like sucked into the simulacra of what the 1950s was. Because I mean, this is all
on both sides, by the way, on both sides.
I mean, both sides do it, and I mean, like you guys are fighting over these like handcrafted drawn images of Americana made up by a bunch of kooks in Madison Avenue. Like this is not the political fight that you think that you're having.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point, actually. And the thing is, though, about that sort of the critique of the 50s, it mimics the critique of the way in which culture went in the 1990s against suburban America. The Simpsons was ostensibly the beginning of The Simpsons was that.
Well, it was also just a flipping of the media that was on in the 1980s because
that's what it is. Yeah,
because I mean, exactly, think about it. All this like suburban flipping over. What are you really making fun of? You're making over TV shows like 30 something. You're making over the fact that like and it doesn't ever talk about the struggles that came out of like the late 80s and 90s with like the savings and loan crisis and things like that. None of that gets addressed.
The post-Vietnam boomer generation as well. Like that's yeah. So the ending of it, this film in particular, more than the other ones, deals with the anhero question, because I do notice that when I was a kid, and maybe you were a bit too young for this, it's sort of like the anhero question was very prominent. It very much was about like cyberbullying came out, like the sort of the other moral panic of the millennial generation. This is but the anheroing and the anorexia, the body image thing, very much Generation X. Still the millennials retained it, but now it was taking place in the online world, especially here in Canada, the Amanda Todd girl, so it's there. But in this film, there is that theme because there was that recognition of the abnormally high rates of sunsetting among, LGBT
Well, yeah,
people.
I mean, there was a lot of, even the 1990s sort of like American pediatrics, but also the American Psychological Association did a lot of work on, well, not to use the word explicitly, but say, sunsetting or anhero contagion, how one person will do it, it's publicized, and people are inspired to do it. In America, though, a lot of that focus was more so on bullying and everything post Columbine was about shootings. And so, America's cultural focus, body stuff was definitely brought up, but it was more about, things like autism.
Weird losers.
Weird losers, and making sure that, they don't start playing pumped up kicks when they go to school,
they don't start playing Little Dark Cage.
So
nothing
changes because, hey, all that stuff that, time's a flat circle,
Yeah. But see, this is why we're a good team, because I can talk about what was going on in the cultural scene, and you, of course, can land it in the sort of politics and the political, the geopolitical history of the time. And I think that's makes a good mix. So this so you wanted to take the lead with Doom Generation. This is film number 2. Doom Generation. This is the more popular one.
Go get my notes.
This came out in 95, I think.
Yeah, year I was born.
Oh wow, so I was about I want to say 3 years old.
As me.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this stars who played
James Duvall,
Xavier.
Rose McGowan.
Rose McGowan, James Duvall, and then let me just look up the third guy because Xavier's name is Jonathan. I cannot pronounce that last name. Sketch. Anyways, plays Xavier.
Yeah, I think he was in pop dramas or something.
I think so. He's been in other stuff, but so I mean, this film is really just this like narrative of things. It's a dark comedy first and foremost. Like it's if you don't notice it, it will hit you over the head with it so fast.
Yeah.
But James Duvall and Rose McGowan are this like couple. And this is probably the most red pilling of all 3 of the films because it's just like women cause problems. End of discussion.
Yeah.
And
and another thing to go ahead.
Go for it.
No, I was going to say really quickly that all 3 films begin with industrial music and with shoegaze. The soundtracks, because this is MTV generation, the sound, and to this day, I mean, still when we were kids with emos and goths and then later hipsters, but the soundtracks are very important because I think the inability to have direct intimacy is because you're feeling these things through both, pornography and of course the soundtracks, the music. There's always shoegaze, there's always industrial. And it very much is like if you watch the Chris Ott review, the when he left Pitchfork, he did these vlogs. He talked about the history of shoegaze, how it's like, something so beautiful that these teens couldn't bear to even like look at each other. Because they're, sealed up in the rooms. This is very much after like the masculine 1980s, pop and, hardcore and like, what punk developed after, very much masculine orientated. But what were all the sad boys and femcells going to do?
And they had shoegaze.
Here they are. They had shoegaze and industrial. And so the film Doom Generation, I believe, opens up with 9 Inch Nails. But fun fact,
sure.
the Austrian painter enthusiast group that harasses them in the film was actually played by the band Skinny Puppies, the famous industrial group from Canada. So yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Good job.
It opens up in this like shady
warehouse party.
And she's selling drugs, and like she tells some like guy to like saw it off, and she's like looking for her skull lighter, which that'll appear later, don't you worry. And we see James Duvall, and this is where you get the sad boy, feminine style character, your proto simp, if you will.
Yeah, he very much has the whiny, like not whiny, but like the very like. Hey,
the effeminate, soft-spoken, like very happy to be with a girl and puts her up on a pedestal and is willing to do anything for her.
Kind of like I Can Click, by the way. Oh no, I can't mention drama. No.
Oh well.
Sorry.
Anyways, in his simpery, right?
I totally just shaded on I Can Click, but he deserved it. He skeeved on me. He blocked me. He said I was a degenerate. You know what? I Can Click. You can go. Never mind. Go ahead.
Oh my. So anyways, there are a lot of things about both masculinity, sexuality, and also like just political culture that I think is definitely worth diving into this. I will just get it out of the way. Rose McGowan in this film is an absolute stunner. Oh my gosh. I'm not gonna lie.
But like the one review said,
also don't watch any of these films with like, with either A, the, very loudly, or B, I mean, just watch them with people. Very graphic and just a lot of sex in all 3 of them. But
and Rose McGowan mixes like smoke show, but like a very like standoffish, like mean girl type of
standoffish, mean girl, but like if push came to shove, she would, and she does, and she'll leave people for dead. But so like they pick up this like drifter. His name's Xavier, whom James Duvall's character, I think his name is Jordan, calls him X, affectionately. And like there's this sort of boyish innocence in James Duvall's character, where you'll see it throughout the film, where it leads to sort of this open-ended ambiguity with his sexuality. But you see two contrasts of men here. You see one whom is far more extroverted. He's built different. He's far muscular, taller. He's got the Chad jawline going.
Yeah.
Whereas James Duvall is playing a sort of the soft-spoken, effeminate character with like anything you want. And
you're doing pretty good, actually.
and it shows between the two of them, because later on, despite the fact that Rose McGowan's character Amy is, she doesn't like Xavier at all, the two end up sleeping together while he's out doing his own business, James Duvall's character. But you see the two differences in men here that Amy's putting up with. James Duvall, he's in all there's plenty of sex that happens throughout this film.
Oh yeah.
And in one of the scene, like in all the sex scenes that Amy and James Duvall have together, he's the bottom. He's she's on top of him. She's doing all of the work. And every time that she's with Xavier, he's doing all of the work. He's acting like a man in this situation, or at least in that instant. He's very much is
the cool guy, reject. Yeah.
But all this adventure starts off because they picked him up from a fight and things like that. And after they tried getting together intimately, and to which Jordan's character can't get it up. But they go and pick up some snacks at a 7-Eleven. Asian store owner. Feels kind of relevant to today's politics in a lot of ways. But when they don't have the money, which coughs up to $6.66, that plays throughout the film.
666, yeah.
666 plays throughout the entire film. And all of a sudden, Xavier swarms in when the Asian store owner pops out with a shotgun to take care of it. And all of a sudden, shot goes off. The Asian store owner's head ends up on top of some hot dogs and guacamole. Starts talking. It felt straight out of Reanimator, right, with the talking head and just and it's just that Jeffrey Combs is so fucking funny in that movie. But
if I recall, there's billboards in the convenience store of the apocalyptic nature.
Oh yeah, I think there's also one about there's a billboard later on. I think when they're on one of the highways that talks about the rapture is coming. There's a lot of apocalyptic feeling, and it's done in fairly shady parts of town where this is a place where you lock your doors, and so that really is what starts to set things off. And so, they're trying to recover from all this. Amy's in the bathtub, and eventually, James Duvall gets in there. But James Duvall character, before he goes into the bathroom, has the weird, very sexually charged moment with Xavier. But it gets interrupted by I need it's played for last. I gotta pee, and gets up and leaves. And he's with Amy in there, and so we later find out that they think that they get off scot-free, which they don't. When they find out, the Asian store owner's wife, who watched the whole thing take place, and their kids were just looking the other way. The mom went into some sort of suicidal rage and took out her whole family and herself. And so he's like, "Oh, we're good, we won't be considered suspects." But they end up becoming that. But throughout this film, they meet all sorts of other characters. They go to a drive-through. And the guy at the drive-thru recognizes Amy because apparently they had slept together at some point. He's like, "You broke my heart." And he literally gets out of the drive-thru window and shoots at their car with a shotgun. He wants his revenge. And he goes after them for revenge, all at the same time that, these three characters, Xavier, James, and Amy, are all trying to get along together. It's a throuple, as they like to say these days. It's very awkward.
Oh my god, yeah. Polyamory is a very strong theme in here, and
polyamory, cuckoldry, and just
bisexuality as
female
well.
promiscuity as well. Because every encounter that they go into, some character, male or woman, will recognize Amy and be like, "Well, we were together and we had all these feelings," and which also foreshadows really how this film ends, because
it's funny how based Rose McGowan is nowadays, exposing Hollywood, going on Tucker,
But in this film, right, they go to some bar because she's thirsty or whatever, and one of the women, who I think is played by I'm trying to remember. It doesn't matter at this point. I can't remember off the top of my head, but she goes there, and this woman is just like, "I'm your slave. Is this man done something to you?" And it foreshadows how the movie ends when she pulls out a fucking katana and is threatening James Duvall's character with total emasculation. Which again, Xavier comes to the rescue and like gets one
He's
of
like
her...
the phallic symbol. It's funny because Xavier, being the man, or Z as they call him, like there's this one point where Rose McGowan gets pissed off. She's like, "Wow, are you just a life support system for your dick?" Like, total like third waiver thing to say.
But I mean, at the same time, right? Like throughout the film, she's a mix of like prudish but incredibly crass. Like anytime that Xavier is far more masculine or anything, he's like, "You're just repulsive, you're just disgusting." And but she says in the way that Rose McGowan says these lines, it's so fucking forced that it's just like,
women when they say that, they're like,
but it goes back from being forced lines to, no, this is believable because this is how women actually talk. And like it's just so in the essence of it being so grunge and indie, it's very realistic in that fashion of where how money are or how women can be.
Grunge and indie, it's funny because throughout the film the cinematography of course becomes way better, way more higher budget than
he's got a budget of almost $1 million in this film, so he's got like a crew. He can actually hire extras to do things, and I mean this allows him to have like props for it, because like the guy from the drive-through like comes back to like get revenge, and so while like, you know, James Duval character is sleeping in the other room, or in their car, Rose McGowan is sleeping with Xavier, like, you know, just enjoying themselves. And, you know, all of a sudden, and again, a lot of phallic symbology in there, because like, how does James Duval wake up to this crazy guy with the gun? The barrel of the gun is in his mouth in a very like obviously sexual way. And he's
so that's another thing. Sex and death, and all three of them are equated with each other. Very strongly. So yeah, then what's interesting though is the landscape of the film, the cinematography of it. Really, it's kind of weird because it's like a declining America. It's sort of like foretelling in a way, because
but it's all in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
All
but it's
LA.
Like there still is things like convenience stores and like fast food joints. It seems that they live off of this stuff because they're basically like teen waistos driving around California. But it's like they live in hotel rooms in their car. But it's like America is almost like half collapsed at this state. Like half post-industrialized.
Reminds me of, though, in a lot of ways, like since we're talking about like these like mid 90s, early 2000s like counterculture, like there's a Decemberist song, which I know. There's a confession of bands I like. There's a song though called "On the Bus Mall," and it has a lot of like motifs and feeling of the same stuff here in this movie, because like in the song they'll talk about like, you know, just like selling themselves, pulling tricks, and stashing away their bucks to live in hotel rooms where they sleep in on the weekends. Whereas these guys are pretty much doing the same. They're peddling drugs. They don't have any money. They're just like getting by. They're screwing around because there's no one else to do. They get wasted all the time. And like, you know,
they live off of gas station food.
Yeah, they live off of gas station food, hot dogs, beer, selling, you know, and it's just the same sort of stuff that a lot of the sort of like mountain
very loose sexual morals.
Loose sexual moral, all the sort of stuff that you hear from music, like from John Darnielle or Colin Meloy, like that culture is still very much alive. Even today,
a lot of hipster music nowadays.
And so but this film like embodies it in a very realistic fashion, to where, you know, that ambiguous loose sexual morals, like even though she doesn't like him, like it's that sort of like when a guy acts like a jerk and the woman like it's a very like, you know, very confessional sort of red pilling movie in that way.
But this is like actual low life stuff. This is not like a pastiche of like living in like Williamsburg and like, you know, this is like
this isn't Call Me by Your Name. This is like someone this is not Call Me by Your Name. This is basically just like, these are the wastos of life, the runaways, the people that said, screw you, mom and dad, we're going to live on our own. And like, there's even a point where like the parents do get mentioned. I mean, Xavier changes his story about his parents all the time, about like, oh, they've been dead. Oh, I fought one of them. Oh, I like beat one of them to death. He's always this like lonesome drifter with a different story for whoever he's with. Whereas like, you know, James Duval's character is just like, oh, you know, I gotta go call my mom and dad and let them know I'm on vacation. Oh man, this is bad. You know, the answering machine wouldn't let me talk to him. And so the film goes on, and eventually they're like running away because, you know, they've had an experience with the decapitated Asian store clerk at 7-Eleven, the crazy guy at the drive-thru, and then their crazy lady at a bar, which gives us some foreshadowing for how the movie ends with emasculation. And then at the same time, like, they find some like industrial park or like warehouse to like sleep in, and they have at it. They have
they're having a bit of a three-way,
yeah,
menage a trois.
And but they get up and leave, and all of a sudden the homofash shows up.
Yeah,
very very literal real homofash.
Fashy goys. Yeah. I'm talking the old school ones, not like nowadays.
Old school buff dudes with a certain Hindu symbol of peace painted on their chest. They beat up everybody, and and
they're played by Skinny Puppy, which is kind of crazy.
They have their way with Rose McGowan on an American flag while doing the Pledge of Allegiance with the Star Spangled Banner playing.
Oh my god, this is so edgy.
Clearly, like, it's the straight white patriarchy coming in, like the red-blooded American males hating their doing some old-fashioned bashing.
It's basically the vision of like I'm trying to think of a blue check who would think like that. It's basically like what Vouch thinks is going to happen in 2 years.
So it's what everyone it's how everybody reacted. It is how everybody reacted when Clarence Thomas and his concurring opinion said that under this logic, Oberfell and all these other cases should be considered. And everyone lost their minds over a concurring opinion that many would say is maybe dicta, because it's only Clarence Thomas's opinion. It's not the rest of the courts.
Right.
And so, everyone's like, oh my God, they're going to overturn Oberfell. Like, gays are going to have to speak Kalari again. They're going to have their underground bars and saunas or whatever. And so, like, in the 1990s, where that threat is probably a little more apparent.
It would be like the 50s where they're forced to like go into they're forced to cottage, right? And then like even here in where I live, there's a semi-popular mall where I live, and in my old man remembers this. In the 60s, the paper actually named the guys that were cruising in the mall bathroom stalls.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, nowadays
the police arrested them, and the paper.
But I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? Even Hollywood tabloids in like the 50s, 60s, and sometimes even to the 70s, they would make sure that any of their like boyish stars or like young men that were like really big with women, any single one of them that was like, was gay or got caught at like one of those kind of parties or police raids, they would set them up with women all the time just to make sure that like the image of them being heterosexual was still kosher with the public, despite the fact that even
George's day, that was,
I mean, that stuff is definitely what's out there. But I mean, in this film, right, like that ever-present fear, right, which I mean still exists despite the fact that nowadays they kind of won and dominate the culture.
They kind of won. Yeah, that's an understatement.
I mean, they
in my country it's illegal to criticize them.
Yeah, so. I mean, and I'll try and play nice then, so I don't say anything that gets you in trouble. But
but you're right. Like, there still is, I think,
but there's an ever-present threat. They kind of had inherited another culture's idea that everyone is out to get them at all times, no matter where they are or how secure they are in power.
Without going into detail. But
I don't need to go into details. You know what I'm talking.
Yeah, but what is funny though is that I wrote down notes about it. How so the neo Austrian painters, the fasci goys, they are oddly sympathetic in certain ways in this film because they are creatures of this end times wasted America like everybody else, and they are reacting to the sort of toppling over of the older order by acting as nihilistic and sadistic misanthropes, and even like them RPing them doing certain acts to Rose McGowan on the American flag. I know that's like very cheap crass symbology right there, but that I think is a symbol of like
symbology is like came back in full force after like the Dobbs decision with like all the political cartoons, or it was like you had one this is my favorite one of those was just like they had like the Pope holding a gun to a pregnant Statue of Liberty, and her tablet has the Genesis quotation. I think it's like in Genesis 3 or 4, where it's about like, oh, if someone like if they've gotten pregnant from whoredom, like let them be burned. And it's just like, oh,
whoa,
like, what are the messaging that I'm getting out of this? That, you know,
the best one was the Trump and the Republican Party holding down.
Oh yeah,
Liberty,
and he's like, that one. And Trump's pulling up his pants or whatever right afterwards.
Yeah, yeah, that one too. But there was the other one from like 2016 where it was like the Republic. It's like on the armband, Republican Party. The other one's Trump, and they're holding down Lady Liberty to
oh yeah.
Certain terrible acts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rose McGowan being, you know. But then I forget what happens in the fighting. I think Xavier
in the fighting, Xavier manages to free Rose McGowan, but based on what we saw earlier, the foreshadowing comes true, and the Fasci guys emasculate and put it in James Duvall's mouth, leaving him for dead. Rose McGowan.
Very much sexual sadism and humiliation going along.
Yeah, so they leave him for dead. And the film ends with like Rose McGowan and Xavier just driving in through the middle of the desert. They don't reflect on anything at all of what.
He's like, "You want a Dorito?"
Yeah, and that's how it ends. The film literally rolls to credits where he offers her a chip, and they just like drive off, and that's how it ends. Yeah. And but there's so much more that this film goes into that I think is just really more fascinating. Like the two visions of the male. One that is sort of this like post-industrial, post-Americana, basically like your proto-soy fat, you know, boy here, right? Like he's just very simpish. He's very effeminate. He's like, well, whatever you want. Like it's okay,
so egalitarian. Soft boy,
and it goes into, you know, the fact that he's passive. He doesn't take action. She lets her do all the work when they're intimate. You know, he's just here for the ride. He's very dumb, played for laughs.
Female-led relationships, I think that's
female-led relationship where it's the woman who's the more crass and open-minded and open-legged one compared to him who's just happy to have somebody, to a point where he and Xavier are alone. And he has this like weird confessional man-to-man talk where he's just like,
but they're like, like he's laying on the couch. And
I mean, it's very sexual. It's
very sexually charged, very bisexual.
Vibe right. Very ambiguous. Like, oh, I can be this, right? You know, like I can open. Which again, we see that all the time today, where like people now act that way or are open to that by grooming, conditioning. Or just because it's popular in the culture where, you know, if I need to be standing out as a white guy, this is what I got to do. Which, again, there is no progressive role model for straight white men. And to where he asks Xavier's character, well, what's it like? And he's like, well, what do you mean? He says, all of the pushing, the work, the thrusting, the sweat, you know, things that happen in the bedroom that, you know, James Duvall's character doesn't experience, but Xavier clearly does. It's almost, it's like the meme of like the skinny guy in glasses, like chatting up in a chat room, and then like the four like roided up like bodybuilders are like answering, Will King, you know, like this is what it's really about. That's kind of what it felt like, but it's far more sexually charged in that regard, because these two could easily sleep together, and they do have a threesome. Later on in the film. But like to me, that was one of the biggest things that hit me, was just like the which way Western man, right? Are you going to be
Xavier?
You know, are you going to be Xavier? Are you going to be James Duvall's like emasculated simp for Rose McGowan? But also, right, the simple fact that what is it that these like simpish types go after? They do go after more like promiscuous
masculine
women, or masculine, promiscuous, and really just crass, not the Mary type kind of character, where Rose McGowan, they're constantly getting in trouble because everywhere they seem to go, Rose McGowan has slept with somebody. And you know, at no point in time does James Duvall's, you know, right? And at no point in time does James Duvall's character like stand up for himself
or questions it.
Nor does he question it. He just goes along with the fact that his girlfriend's a total fucking whore, you know? And he just goes along with it. And I mean, these are things, the reason why I thought the Doom generation is probably the most prominent of the three films, and the one I wanted to talk about the most, is because, good God, you see this all the time today in 2022. I mean, there are guys that have no problem with their body count of who themselves or their partners. There's no problem with the fact that they're going to run into people that are going to be like, yeah, bro, like, here's everything that I still have from her, or here, she's still talking to me, or the fact that, like, they don't care that there are other men out there that can just do what they want. But unlike today, where I think there's a lot more like self-actualized, self-awareness, self-actualized awareness of like, oh, there are other people that are like doing this to me, where they come up with cope, right? Like, I think the kind of more famous example more recently has been from what's his name? iDubbbz and his girlfriend, right? Like, I mean, that's the most prominent example.
What's her name? I forget her name.
But I mean, like, where he's like going on camera to defend that his like fiance has an OnlyFans that he paid for breast implants and things like that. I mean, like, you know, like in this situation, and I mean, that's the more public in Life of the Rich and the Famous, where the attitude of James Duvall's character has manifested itself into the mainstream, and so now the lifestyles of the rich and the famous, or even of e-celebrities of our culture today, you know, the proletariat, lumpen proletariat culture is now the culture of the bourgeois. And it's just kind of depressing, right? Like, because it's like that high-low versus middle thing that a lot of us have been talking about lately. I did a video on it, where like the low culture has to be identifiable, or at least relatable to the high culture. So now high culture is doing the sort of wastoid stuff of the 1990s, and that's high culture today. Which only begs the question, well, what is wastoid culture like now? And I think that kind of has manifested itself on a lot of internet. Well, I mean, like, you know, that's why like incel discourse is a thing, because some people associate it as wastoid culture. I think of it as a symptom of a much larger societal problem. But like, all these sort of discourses come out of it. But like the emasculated James Duvall is the now masculine character for a lot of the soy-fed high culture that we exist in nowadays. And it's absolutely just like the inverse. Here's this grunge indie film about apocalypticism, promiscuity, bisexuality, drugs, etc., and, you know, actual crime, people dying. Now that's just part and parcel for everything that we've got going on today. And it's
including the hate crimes and fashy goys.
I mean,
but now it's much more indirect and internet driven, and like, you know, end towers or whatever. Like, it's not, they're not like, it's very much mediated through the online, which is a point I actually wrote down independently of like what you were saying. So Prue dropped off a bit. So let's get to some super chats, but we have the last film to go. So for $2 from how do I say that? Timmy Balenciaga. I think that's how I pronounce. I'm very sorry if I mispronounced your name, but thank you very much, my friend. And $5 from Leonard D. Jogera. Oh man, I'm butchering this. Shake my damn head, Gio. Stop shilling. You patrons give you already enough money. Write a book for a chain. Well, I'm working on it. Listen to Less Friction. Very good alt rock band. I think I've heard of Less Friction. I'll listen to them, my friend. And yes, I'm very grateful for all my patrons. I think that's probably why I don't get as much super chats as Prude over here. But I think, I mean, I'm to tell you the truth, okay, as much as I love super chats just because I have them enabled, and it's kind of like, I'm a real YouTuber now. Like, it's nice to get super chats, but I would rather have the consistent patrons there. So thank you very much to all my beautiful patrons. A lot of great content coming down the pipe. So yes, but Prude, your analysis of Doom Generation, 100% spot on. And I also observed that low culture is the internet online, but the internet online is still being colonized and strip mined by people on high, like the Times Squares people. But no, never mind. No, not gonna talk about Times Squares again. But but I do notice that the way that the influencer class, they're becoming the celebrities of our generation, and they adopt the sort of decadent, low-class California chic, nihilistic chic of these three films. And it's funny though, because even back then, I would think that we have this sort of like cyberpunk aesthetic, retro futurist fantasy of certain elements of the 1990s. But these youth cultures very much were kind of cut off from the majority of like middle class, like, heartland Americana. Like you pretty much had to be an urbanite to enjoy certain excesses even back then.
What's the phrase, right? Like, where goes California goes America.
Yeah.
And so like what emerges out of a post-industrial, post-Reagan 1990s, 2000s America? Well, I mean, that's the dominant culture now. And I mean, it's kind of funny. Like, I know you probably don't want to talk about Dime Square or anything like that. But
yeah, go ahead. It's okay.
But it's like the transgressive nature of the online low culture, which for all intents and purposes is right wing, right? And that's what attracts, I think, a lot of this stuff where, it's politics is kink. Oh, this is transgressive. Oh, this is
politics
spicy.
is kink. Yeah.
And so,
and what did they call M. Crumps? They started doing the chant in his article. The
I did not read it.
Yeah, they started calling him a T-word chaser. They like this was. I mean, this is. I think it's not like, okay. I don't mean to insult anyone, because I hope one day I could get Anna to content minded. But it very much is sort of like the appropriation of transgression. Although I do think that Anna probably has more of a mind on her, and I think that what she's saying is at least serious. But I do notice that there is a big trend, and I think that, I hate to say it, but our friend Curtis Yarvin's at the center of it, of sort of like the appropriation of transgression, I think. But I don't know. I mean, there are a variety of reasons for that. I think that probably Moldbug is a safer bet than even Bronze Age Pervert in some respects, right?
Well, I mean, once at that point, once you're on, like, you're more in front of the media more, you're on Tucker Carlson. I mean, like, he's here for a much longer considerable time to come. And I do think that, there's a lot of people that take issue with his takes or whatever as of late, which, I mean, I have a working theory on that, but maybe we're like harbinger purchasers, like we're just trying to be shooken off now. But we'll see, right? I mean,
me and Default talk about this as well. We have some theories about that, but and I think that, well, first of all, just the mere fact that if you like listen, I've listened to, I think, almost every episode of Caribbean Rhythms. I have to catch up, but the fact that like Curtis doesn't have like clips of him like dropping N bombs and Z bombs and F bombs, I think that's probably why. That's that probably helps him, but other reasons too, is ideological disposition. But I mean, I'm halfway through your great conversation with the writer that was friends with Curtis.
Jeremy Carl from the Claremont Institute.
Yeah, from Claremont. Yeah. I'm halfway through that. I think it's a very interesting look. If you want to post it in the chat.
Sure, I can do that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's
so Doom Generation, you liked it the most, you would say?
I didn't get to watch all of Nowhere. But of all that I've seen, I really did enjoy Doom Generation, because between that one and I think that a lot of our sort of I think how LGBT culture has changed in the media, like you will never get another show like, or you'll never get another film like Totally Effed Up. Because that would require you to be brutally honest in ways that I don't think that the current LGBT discourse or zeitgeist would ever
allow for.
Well, yeah, because if you start being brutally honest about things, like, like all of a sudden the narrative that you've cropped for yourself is really bad. I mean, even with the whole, current situations with like how Reddit and Twitter are trying to ban certain, words, like, in regards to indoctrination and grooming and things like that. And they're like, okay, predator, right? Like, to me, it's just like, from a cultural and historical political narrative, where like you spent such a long time, and I mean such a long time, trying to bash and change the narrative that no, we're not, predators. And I mean, I think their greatest blessing was all of the stuff that came out with like Catholic Church abuse in the early 2000s.
That was their that was the haven of it. That was
their safe. Yeah, that was their safe escape from anything that they had to do.
The late 80s and early 90s, there was a lot of attention paid to certain traffickings of young boys that Ted Gunderson covered. But by the time the Catholic Church scandals broke out, that was a godsend for the name.
Yeah, I mean, like any sort of talk about them died. But that it's almost like they can't help themselves.
It's sort of like
now we're back on teachers and kids.
Oh god, like I mean, it's funny how that whole wholesome propaganda memes, wholesome Reddit memes got banned for copyright infringement, but yet people were like the absolute worst people on Twitter. They're like, why can't they ban libs of TikTok? And what's her name? The woman that runs I mean, why can't they ban libs of TikTok? Why can't they ban, iHypocrite? Why can't they ban, other people that are exposing? Like, it's just Twitter does. I know Twitter got rid of the one infamous, Monkey thread about the certain pig,
the return to monkey thread. Yeah.
I know they had to get rid of that one. That was too. And the guy's, I made the mistake of going to the guy and seeing his pin tweet. It's not before he locked. Anyways, no, but I do think that, I mean, as much as we talk about this, I do think that an honest exploration of it is quite is quite endearing in a way, and you do really feel sympathy somewhat for these characters, despite them semi-reflecting on their actions. I know James Duvall's characters throughout all three films.
Oh yeah,
he does reflect upon, like, even the one part in Nowhere, which we're gonna get to next. He says, like, I'm 18 and I'm already doomed, man. Like, because he sees all of this like violence and again, another film where he's cuckolded.
Yeah.
So, like, because the character played
in Totally Effed Up, he doesn't have a boyfriend. In this film, he gets cuckolded and emasculated. And then in the third film, he gets cuckolded once more. Like, there's this constant...
And there's also a tension with him and this other, like, gay guy.
I mean, with the thing with Twitter, though, right? Like, what happened there gets completely overstated in the media. So they're like, oh, thank God we can point to the clergy of the Catholic Church and not, I mean, that was a godsend to them for the last 20 years. Compared to
last 30 years almost.
The last 30 years almost. And now they're just going straight towards, teachers and choirs singing about coming after. And I mean, what's funny though is it's just like, well, why can't they go after these people? I'm like, they do all the fucking time. Like, how many times has iHypocrite had a channel nuked or a strike
demonetized,
or demonetized time and time again, right? But the thing that I thought was the funniest thing about that came out of the blue for someone who talks about gender all the time, it was like the reasonable left came in, because here's Jesse Signal complaining about libs of TikTok. And it's just like,
the Jesse Signal guy, he's kind of like, I don't know, but
that's why I said reasonable left.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, he's like
sarcastically, just
he's like,
well, he had quote tweeted libs of TikTok, and he says, well, it's easy to cherry pick their videos or something like that to misrepresent a whole group of people and all that jazz. And it's just like, she's not cherry picking; these people broadcast it themselves. She's just retweeting for confession.
And you have to realize that a lot of the videos on libs of TikTok some of them have millions of views, not from libs of TikTok, on TikTok itself.
Oh yeah,
a lot of them have millions of plays, or at least hundreds of thousands, some of them. So it's not a fringe thing. It definitely resonates. I mean, I think that in some ways I'm going to offend people by saying this. In some ways I can sort of agree with that criticism, because I think as much as like libs of TikTok and iHypocrite are doing a very vital service, I guess, like, who's the other guy, Colin Flaherty? I do think that there can be a tendency to cherry pick, and there can be sort of like a fabulation that comes with like highlighting the debauchery of certain groups. But that being said, I mean, like, the fact that the mainstream is working so hard to suppress this kind of information, that's really telling upon itself. Well, but I do, but I do think
it's the thing about emperors having no clothes. Like, it's the thing that Darwin, I think, was really right about. Is like, if you were to do that story today, it's not that the kid points out the obvious and then things change. It's that the kid gets brutally murdered. I mean, and that's what we're seeing now. But unfortunately, Colin Flaherty died almost a year ago now.
He did?
Yeah, it was really depressing.
Oh man, because he was like one of the most banned people on the internet. Like, he had like 50 different YouTube channels. Like, he kept. I didn't know that he died.
Yeah, he had a long illness, and he had passed away.
That's
It was really
unfortunate.
unfortunate because
Yeah.
his books are really worth reading.
Yeah. But I think my only criticism would be that a lot of this stuff tends towards pessimism, like doom pornography for us, like people on our side. But I mean, yeah, that's going to happen. I mean, because the world is quite depressing and
Well, and
on the edge.
it's funny that we've returned, because I mean, these movies kind of highlight, we're talking about this like culture and this like end of an era type deal, where like all of a sudden politics seem really charged because, you know, there's the culture war is alive again, where a lot of people had felt like there's always these time, it's the never ending yin and yang of we're back and we're not going to make it. And for I think a lot of the political energy, mainstream and otherwise, is they're on a position of like, we're so back because like it's culture issues again, whether it was Youngkin, whether it's with Christopher Rufo, Libs of TikTok, like mainstream wise on cultural issues where, you know, it's political civility is kind of gone now. And I think our good friend Martin on Twitter had said it best, where he's just like, I can't really afford political civility that want me dead and my kids emasculated.
Oh, so. I think I saw that one. Is it Martin's back on Twitter, if I recall?
Yes, he is.
Yeah. We have another $5. Yeah, but I really didn't know that about Colin Fleur. That's terrible, man. I'm requesting friends to send much prayers and powers to help me finish this episode. Thanks for the
well, Reprobus is doing an album or an EP. So he's been doing a lot of music actually.
Oh, so. EP. I thought you meant this episode as in give me the prayers to finish this.
No, he's been doing music.
Nice. And when it comes out, I'll definitely promote it. So that's you know, Faust says the same rhetoric, they want you dead as our people do. Yeah, it's true. But I mean, who's in the power to actually turn up the heat, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not getting fed bucks. So
yeah.
I don't serve imperialism.
One day I will get the Theo bucks, but who knows? So yeah, Doom Generation is a really great film. I know that's probably the more popular one, but the next one, the last one in the set, Nowhere, this is the pure fabulation machine. All the narratives, all of the like higher budget, more effects, non-linear narrative, all of like everything is thrown into a blender leading up the last film of the trilogy. Now the rails are totally off. Now the simulation machine of the MTV generation is in full force. This is total post-industrial wasteland California after the orgy society. Youths and teens, you know, basically having a whole very, very, you know, impotent celebration of their own decay in a way. Very much, you know, you can feel the vibe of it. It's a really great film. So it starts off, it's the group of friends. They all have very interesting names. James Duvall's character is called Dark, or they call him Dork.
You have Dark, Mel.
Mel is the what's her name? Rachel Truce. Who?
Yeah.
Is she in Buffy the Vampire
Lucifer,
Slayer?
I think.
Lucifer is her lesbian lover.
Yeah.
Sate. What else?
What is it? Juji Fruit or something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of strange names.
The drug dealer's called Handjob.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a character named Dingbat as well. Very strange. But yeah, I mean, the other thing about these movies, like, thank God, is that they're all less than 90 minutes long. They're all like 80 minutes or less. So like an hour to 20 minutes tops is what you're spending your time on. So, you know, these are very quick to get through, but man, there's so much shit stuff.
There's so much things going on. It's basically like teens like hopping around California, partying, getting drunk and on substances, and there's a lot of weird things that go on. So I have a bunch of notes here.
It's like 90210. There you go. There's the zip code I was looking for.
Yeah, 90210.
90210. So much of that in this one.
Yeah, a lot of it. Like there's the Riot Girl and the grunge soundtrack, industrial soundtrack. There's everything here. So then there's this point where James Duvall in the beginning says that sometimes I feel old-fashioned, like I'm an alien from another planet, meaning he's referring to him wanting to settle down with Mel, his sometimes girlfriend, but they're in like this poly open relationship.
Yeah.
And he's like, there's this craving for normalcy that just is impossible nowadays. And it's very tragic. And he's again another simp cuckold. And so he feels like an alien, but then when it comes out, he sees that an alien is abducting people and zapping people. This is like total MTV schlock right here. And the congresswoman or something, her son, which is the gay guy that has the what do they call the thing? We have two different eye colors. My camera. Heterochromia. Yeah. Looks very softish, soft boy-ish. Yeah, and so the alien, I believe in the beginning, only James Duvall sees this alien, and he like films everything. So again, the reintroduction of the indie film, the Dogma 95, comes back in because he's filming everything. But then, of course, it cuts out when he films the alien. And then the senator claims that her son is being abducted by aliens. There's this news report that talks about AIDS, drugs, gang violence, alien abductions. But then it goes to here's a message from our sponsors. So very much the 90s like ad busters culture critique stuff, of late capitalism. This is when Naomi Klein's book No Logo was very popular. So they're going along, and there's this party that they're going to at nighttime. There is this actor who is, I guess, meant to play a Baywatch character who wants to he wants a normal life. He doesn't want to be a teen heartthrob, but then he ends up.
Oh, isn't that Jason Simmons from Baywatch?
Yeah, Jason Simmons. Yeah. Yeah. But then he ends up being this innocent young girl who's the sister of another character, ends up doing some RPing stuff to her. And again, so it's almost like the craving to get out of that Hollywood fabulation machine, but still being a sadistic half victim, half perpetrator. And it also shows, I think, like the really sort of like riot girl, vicious, cynical critique of like middle America. Because like there's the one, the two gay guys are in a band together. What's his name? There's Cowboy, and then there's the other guy. I forget his name, but he ends up
Bart, I think.
Bart. He ends up dying in the end. His head was in the oven.
He's a heroin addiction.
He's a heroin addiction. Yeah, he buys drugs from the dealer, hand job, and it shows his parents are like immigrants from, I think, like Germany or Scandinavia or somewhere, and like it's sort of like the riot girl, I hate my parents, stuffy middle America that's on the decline. That sort of vibe to it. But it's like the MTV thing. It's almost like a music video version of it. The sort of like hyper fabulized critique of middle American suburbia. So, so he says that he's an alien. And of course, the alien becomes a symbol of their alienation. Of course, ironic, of course. Yeah. Of course, a horse, of course. Right. Cali lifestyle is marketing / fandom lifestyle. Like the sort of like, there's a romanticism to being a wasto in a way. There's
I mean, all three of these movies do some kind of affinity or affection for this lifestyle. I mean, otherwise you really don't make these movies if you don't. But like nowhere, I think, out of the three of them, from about half of what I had saw, it was just like it was a love letter, but also like a love letter buried in irony.
Yeah, and these people are like literally living in hell. And the end of it. Right? Yeah. There's like societal decay. Even there's this part in the film where the couple that ends up there's a scene where there's this couple that they're always like groping each other in public, very much what do they call that? PDA,
public display of affection.
Yeah, and then there's a scene where they are on this like Venice Beach area, and they go to one of those like palm readers, and then she just has like a piece of fried chicken, and she's reading their palms like death, and he's like, cool, man, like,
Yeah, and that's in all 3 movies as well.
The
I mean, totally
sex,
effed up, had tarot cards and
yep,
astrology. It's all there. All
it's
the
all
alt
there.
is there.
The esoteric, the sort of like pop esoteria of like, kids getting into Wiccan and tarot cards, that is the connection between sex and death in the film. The Freudian nirvanic principle, that lust for completion, is everywhere here. Which, I mean, you could say, if this is a film giving a sympathetic light to LGBT culture, I mean, that would never be equated nowadays. It would only be a celebration of life, even though there's a lot of elements of death. So even the heterosexual couples experience the hanging of death in the air. So there's a scene where, his girlfriend's giving him a booyah, and he's like driving his car, his Cadillac, right, without the sunroof, and he says something. They're on the Hollywood Hills, if I recall. Where is it? He says that, where is it? A wasteland of glittering filth, emptiness, and death are as they're looking over the California skyline there. And that's a great, I love that quote. So then there's also like depictions of like media figures. I believe Denise Richardson makes a cameo where she's the sister of Lucifer, and so she's doing a photo shoot with this model who's like Bronze Age bodybuilder, and the one girl is like, "Isn't that your muff diving sister with your mocha flavored girlfriend?" Like, you'd never would have this nowadays in the film. Never, they would never say that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you wouldn't hear that term at all.
Yeah. And so
much here.
So much here. So the film star he craves for real intimacy, but then he submits to his violent and sexually sadistic nature by going after the girl. And I believe she also dies. She's killed by the alien, if I recall.
Yeah, I think it's what, 3 that get killed right before he gets her on camera. And it's brutal.
No, but in her room she gets yeeted. Like, there's blood everywhere, and there's it's crazy near the end of the film.
And then there's also the because I mean, death is so front and center. Well, in all 3 of these movies, it is. But like, that sort of cultural Americana critique of like it's in Totally Effed Up. It's definitely brutally front in your face when it's in the Doom Generation. But there's also that televangelist.
There's always the televangelist. Yeah.
So I mean, in all 3 movies, there's some sort of televangelist or Christian beating you over the head type deal. And in this one, although it's much more upfront, saying like you've got to hero yourself to get to heaven.
Yeah, there very much is like that weirdo like cult vibe.
Yeah.
It sort of reminded me a bit of the Local 95. Is it 95? Local
58.
Local 58, yeah, about the when America's enemies have fully conquered it, you must hero everybody to like preserve the American dream is to end it. So again, that's the nirvanic principle. It's literally like the misappropriation of Christianity in this like brutal like televangelist form of Protestantism, saying that you must, sunset in order to get yourself closer to heaven, because the world, it's very much Cathar in a way. Like the world is turned into hell on earth. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all culty stuff that you saw out of like the 80s and 90s, whether it was like
especially around this area in California.
Gate stuff, all sorts of stuff like that. And I mean, throughout all of these movies too, right? The idea of bringing heaven to earth is in all of them, whether it's through like your sadistic dark desires and sex, or wanting to like clean, the hell on earth of this place up and return it to its former glory. Like, in some form or fashion, you've got to delete some part of either yourself or society in order to bring heaven to earth, to end the hellscape that you live in, because the apocalypse is just shit.
Yeah, and I noticed that the all-pervasive threat of both like extremely homophobic right-wing politics, like and religiosity, as the films go on, it seems to nowhere they're the ultimate denuded form, because now we're into the late 90s. We're in 97. Like that present threat of the, I guess, what's the buzzword they're using now that doesn't exist? Christian nationalism. That's the buzzword.
Oh,
yeah. So the ever looming threat of this like extreme religiosity is sort of like not there anymore. It's on the TV. It's certainly there in certain communities in America, but it's no longer a cultural force the way it was even in Doom Generation, where the neo-Austrian painters go around, F-slur bashing, right? And of course, another thing too I wanted to mention was by putting James Duval's little guy in his mouth, that is like, total like Wilhelm Reich critique of like fascism being impotent, wanting to get rid of the sexual, the Oedipalizing force. The typical leftoid, like you are repressed. The reason you're on the far right is because you're sexually repressed, blah, blah, blah. So that's definitely the propaganda aspect of Doom Generation.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's there where, in Totally Effed Up, it was about, HIV and stuff being like the perfect right wing, like bioweapon. And they're like, oh, the US government's responsible in the same way that like the gay community then was basically saying like Reagan doesn't care because it's only affecting, a propensity of the population, which is a majority gay. And I mean, Doom Generation, right? That critique is there. And then here it's like it's not as present, like you said. It's just sort of like there's that televangelism, but instead, right, all of the focus is on, even though like the televangelist right-wing Christian threat is gone or much more neutered and tamed by this time, because it's 97, I think. Friends has been out now, or just started, I think, and it had its like it's a lesbian wedding. I think Will and Grace, I think, is just beginning to come on the air.
American Beauty is just down the pipe.
And so I mean, all these things are out, so it's like, so they don't have their normal boogeyman. And so what do we have instead? We have an alien, because even though the right-wing boogeyman isn't there, the boogeyman fear of constant repression, constant attack, the idea of going backwards and regressing in time, has to come from some external force. And in this instance, it's the alien.
Yeah. Very good point. Very amazing point. And that's the thing too, is that when it came specifically to the sort of post like AIDS politics in the 1990s, where the looming threat was still there, but it very much wasn't as it was in the late 80s.
Well, yeah, because you had antiretrovirals, things started to really change.
I think they came out around 95 retrovirals. I think that there was a lot of AIDS victims that were still dying, but by the time they did have retrovirus, I believe there was this documentary on it called the Lifeboat, where it's like the LGBT and drug users that made it to that lifeboat, but there still is that threat. There still is that sort of what was I going to say? There is marked differences. They do sort of play off each other, all three films, but very much the beginning of the 1990s, you have the stark contrast of like religiosity being much more of a force in public life, and also like the setting and the backdrop, and California also changes at this time. They're very much more in this film. Nowhere is an emphasis on post-industrialization. The way that these kids are just messing around in these industrial parks, and they're going to these weirdo parties with like vaporwave lighting and very lush set. It does remind me of a Baz Luhrmann film, like Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, no, it's got that feel to it. Yeah, I mean, so every set feels so what's the word I'm looking for? It feels so surreal, whether like in this movie or in all three of them, like they go to these bars or they go to places where it just is like, it feels like it's covered in like tin foil, or like instead of beads for the door curtain or whatever, it's like plastic can rings, lots of stuff.
James Duval's room is like very like abnormally large, with a big portrait of him with a gun holding to his head, and so that again is another foreshadowing.
And the idea that he feels small all the time, you know, and that he's like, and again, it's kind of funny because we talked about how in the other two films that sort of like
lack of intimacy,
self-awareness. Well, the lack of intimacy, but that self-awareness of what you're not getting, or what you are not, it's not as actualized, but in nowhere it's in full force. Like that actualization has come forth because he says he feels like an alien. He wants normalcy, but he's self-aware of the fact that he can't get it being in like an open bisexual relationship.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Did you see the little Easter egg when they're lying in bed together?
I didn't know. What was it?
John Lennon and Yoko Ono, the world.
Oh,
yeah, they did so he's like clutching onto her, like she's like
the
John
Lennon
out.
picture, where they're both naked and he's like,
fetus position, cradling her. So that's a little Easter egg they did there. And so throughout the film, sex and death is meditated upon. I said, they're often together. The party scene is interesting because that is where James Duval's characters realizes the excess and the waste that they're living in. And he realizes that there's these two like Swedish models that Mel hooked up with before. And she like sort of, she gives like, oh my God, there's this one point where they're naked in bed after that scene of the homage to John Lennon and Yoko Ono. She like gives the most generic, like a Ella tier defense of polyamory. Like she's like, I believe that people are meant for love and sex and that we should spread it to everybody as much as we can throughout our lives, and that even however much sex I have with men and women, that doesn't affect my feelings for you. It's like, oh my God.
But you know what, at least Mel didn't defend the dog pill. That's all that matters.
Yeah, that's it. It's true. That's true. I mean, if this film was made nowadays, maybe, but like,
if this film was made nowadays, Aiello would star it.
Oh, it's true. It's all there, and there'd be like Silicon Valley dweebs having like
yeah. These guys making six figures or more, driving their Teslas to go meet up with their wastoid Aiella girlfriend. Oh God, I can see it now.
Did you ever read the descriptions on her blog about what it's like with the party she hosted, where like we have a room, like we did these like rationalist, like, big yud experimentation where you'd have a room where you just get to cry, and you have another room that's like the orgy room. And like,
I've had her blocked for so long, Gio. I don't know.
Imagine talking to her for 2 hours. I did that. Let's go to the chat here before we wrap up.
That's how I'd feel if I had to talk to her for 2 hours.
Many people on the right, want other people dead. Yeah, that's true. So Vash, in a sense, he's right. Yeah, why? That's the kayfabe. The kayfabe. So anti-retrovirus are basic. No, I can't, Matthew. I can't. I don't know, but I can't read that on air, or else we're gonna get slapped for disinformation. So, oh my God.
Yeah, chat's been wild since you went off. They've been wild this whole time. Actually, the chat is its own separate entity, which God bless them. But
there's some prominent virologists that maintain that. Oh God. Oh man.
Yeah, this is where we need Bap in his.
Yeah. Bap did the whole episode on that.
He sure did.
Yeah, my old man says I'm kind of obsessed with the history of HIV. I don't know. I go because I read the Sala Forum thread, then I went down.
Yeah,
this, like,
that's how I knew. I've said this before, but that's how I first knew about Dr. Fauci. It was through the Sala Forum, and so when all this stuff started, and I saw him come up as like the prominent guy to go to, I was like, oh, we're so screwed.
We're screwed. Yeah. Then I read a bit of the book The River about the origin theory of like the polio, in Africa, and it was and then the science community tried to like bury it because he was critiquing their god Jan Kabrowski, and not to say that Kabrowski was an evil guy, or he did do a lot of good. He invented the mumps V word, but I mean he went to his death denying that he was using monkeys to cultivate gene material for the experimental anti-polio thing in Africa.
Yeah.
So and again, because the mainstream theory is kind of like that it existed since the 1920s. It was only till it hit the 1980s that it went wild everywhere. I don't know about that, but anyways, not to talk about that, or else we're going to see very problematic things that are going to get us banned from YouTube. So, yeah, Nowhere ends with going to this party. He realizes the whole nihilism of it all. He ends up he wanted to hook up with the, what's the gay guy's name?
Montgomery?
Montgomery. Yeah, Montgomery. But then Montgomery says that he was abducted by the aliens. So that could be a metaphor for STDs or whatever. But it's more of the metaphor for alienation in general. Ends up exploding. And another thing, too, in the film, throughout the film, there's a scene with, like, the black biker dude and his girlfriend in this, like, quasi-bondage relationship. And there's also the scene at the end with James Duval, and when Montgomery's, like, wigging out, he's, like, having a seizure. There's the primal scream is very prominent in the film. There's multiple instances of the primal scream of two people screaming together, having memories of screaming. The parents scream when Bart dies, his head was in the oven,
Yeah.
Or he may have ended up anheroing on drugs. So there's this primal scream between in the film, like the cinematography, because of course they had a higher budget to do this. They like juxtapose them rapidly, like screaming. In the end, Montgomery explodes, and this is a total Kafka metamorphosis reference. Out comes this bug alien, this bug man, and the bug alien says to James Duval, who's got blood and gore all over his face in his room, he says, "I'm out of here, man," and he just leaves, and that's the end of the film. It very much ends on a the whole trilogy ends on a Kafkaesque, surrealist, absurdist metamorphosis ending of like pure absurdism. There's no point.
I think maybe also though
we wasted 3 hours watching this. No, I'm kidding.
Well, no, I mean, I was thinking about it's a bug alien, but I'm just now thinking about chasing other things. If you catch my drift, where. But I mean, he explodes. He's dead. I'm out of here.
Yeah. I wonder what that bug.
I wonder what that bug could be. I wonder what that could mean. That's been so prominent in the other two films about drugs and wow.
Yeah. Where does one find this mythical bat podcast? I forget what number. Gumroad, but I forget the exact episode. I think it was one of the earlier episodes.
But he's got over 100 episodes. They're great. You can find him on Gumroad, Caribbean Rhythms, fantastic stuff. Yeah. I'm behind a few episodes, but very good stuff.
I think I'm up to where he interviewed Gregg Nationalist, and then
yeah.
Oh, by the way, Gregg Nationalist will be on Content Minded one day. I just have to schedule things with him. So
good on you.
I have to read Man's World issue 4. So then I will.
I'm looking forward to the Eggs Benedict option.
Oh yeah, his new cookbook.
Yeah.
I have his old cookbook, by the way, but it's half a cookbook, but also half of like the content that you'd find on Man's World. So I really love that. I wanted to buy the annual edition because I am in the annual edition, by the way.
Oh, good on you.
I'm in the go to Antelope Hill Publishing. Oh, I'm sorry, they publish Austrian Painter books. Oh no. It's published by Antelope Hill. I believe Man's World, the print version, is also published by Antelope Hill. I have a visual gallery where I have a visual essay where I have 11 paintings of various bodybuilders, like the musculature, and I got all of the painting, the reference photos from Handsome Thursday. So I thought it was an interesting idea, but they're very abstract paintings. And I have a visual essay. It's accompanied by an essay that I wrote on the Vitalist bodybuilder. So I know, ironic, like, someone like me writing an essay like that, but it's, I hope BAP has read it. I hope BAP.
Well, I'd be in no place to judge either, so don't worry.
Yeah, I know. And we're kind of like opposite ends of the scale there.
We sure are.
Yeah.
Apparently the newest Caribbean Rhythms is supposedly about Mulholland Drive. Oh, I've got to see that.
Whoa, nice.
Gotta go give that a listen.
Yeah, we got to give that a listen. I'm more of a Blue Velvet fan. I watched Mulholland Drive a long time ago.
I haven't seen Blue Velvet in forever, so maybe we should.
Yeah.
We'll cover David Lynch on the show for sure.
Yeah. Did Andrew Sullivan interact with Niccolo Salo? That's pretty crazy. That's probably, probably happened. Yeah. If I recall, he was talking about Mulholland Drive. So Nowhere, I have a few more notes, then we'll go to the reflections on it. So the news report is quite interesting. Again, this very much is like critiquing like 1990s critique of Americana, like the fabulation machine, and like, the RP, the abusive, Hollywood starlet, right? So so I also wrote here that it's kind of mimicking this, but only online now.
Yeah.
It's only like online groups that are, a part of this. So then there's this point where I forget his name. I believe is the biker, the black biker. He ends up beating the drug dealer to death with a can of Cannibal soup. It's Campbell's tomato soup. So I think there's a little bit of an Andy Warhol reference.
I was about to say, I think there's a Warhol reference there.
Yeah, sort of like the Americana and excess and like production and.
Well, and I think that kind of goes back though to what you had mentioned, because we're talking about this like low culture stuff.
Yeah,
like you just said, we all want this online. I just think about James Duvall's character. I just want to be normal.
Yes.
I just want to be left alone. I just want to grill. I just want to be normal. I just want to have a wife and kids.
I want to have my wife.
It's 2030 and I won with my cabin in the woods and my 5 kids and my spinny wheel trad wife.
Yeah. Milk Maiden, Milky's off the charts.
Yeah. Liz Brunig style.
Yeah. Just cream pie nationalism. Oh God.
But yeah, I mean that's where we're at. And
that was the last stream. Remember, like an anime girl would never think about having what.
Oh my God, there was one of the earliest screenshots I have from a YouTube comment somewhere when I first started my channel. It was just like, anime is so great, unlike the real world where we have
That was one comment that Stain Haynes got when he did the Folgers coffee thread. Remember,
I really wanted, yeah.
I have the video preserved forever on my YouTube channel. But the one comment's like, "Wow, this is just like my favorite anime." The what vibe, right?
Yeah.
This is like my favorite anime. Apparently, the Japanese are much more open to that type of. Never mind. I've only heard this secondhand, so don't worry about it. But yeah, Nowhere is a fascinating film. It very much is a time capsule, though, of the MTV stuff. It very much like
all 3 of these movies are a time capsule where only on television could you be so openly subversive in the face of everyone hating you. Because I mean, whether it was Oprah, whether it was Phil Donahue, whether it was even the shock jocks,
Jerry Springer,
you could be as offensive as humanly possible, where they could have like a black family talk to like a bunch of like guys in certain hoods, or
Janet Lake was another one,
or be like like openly Satanist in front of a very like evangelical crowd. Like it was those platforms where you could be transgressive, and that began to die down in the 1980s, to where it was more we're transitioning to the Ted Turner, Larry King style television, to where now it is film where it is now subversive, which I'd argue is probably worse. But
it's like a kitsch subversion. Like it's become kitsch. This sort of
but it's like you said, it's a time capsule to where it's no longer on the television talk show panel or in front of the audience that hates you, but now you can directly document what those people were like.
Yeah. And now the audience is sort of like placated by it. They're sort of like in more of a passive consumer role than like
and I noticed the chat. Yeah, Ricky Lake was
Ricky Lake. Yes, sir. Ricky Lake. Yeah.
Although Ricky Lake was the subject of so much Norm Macdonald hate. I remember that from SNL. Ricky Lake was on television this week for eating another producer. Just jokes like that.
Yeah, it's funny though because nowadays I think we do have our own like like right-wing spectacles of it. Like we do have the same thing, right? But we create them for ourselves though. Jay Dyer has a pretty good analysis of Mulholland Drive.
I really don't watch any of his stuff, but maybe I'll give that one a watch.
Yeah,
but
you should. I've been lagging on watching Jay Dyer. He's got so much stuff though. Like he's got.
But yeah, I mean, it's funny though. Like the right wing for sure does.
That's a good observation.
We like these films, right? They're confessions in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
confessions of the self, confessions of the internal. Self-actualized and self-aware fears.
I was going to say the reflections on all three of the trilogy, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And so like how you mentioned, like, well, really this is explicitly online where the right wing does it, where we have our own ecosystems where we can express these self-aware concerns, critiques, and insecurities. Because I mean, James Duval in all three of these films, I don't know if Gregg Araki's got some sort of issues with masculinity or he had some experience where like, he doesn't feel like one, but I know it's important to like psychologize and things like that, but I hate doing it because I feel like it's such a lefty thing to do. But like the right does it now on the internet where a lot of fiction, a lot of the books that are being read, a lot of the memes that we make fun of ourselves with are about that. Where
Paul Cell is even like that.
Theory Cell, Paul Cell, all the discourse of word cell or shape rotator, like all these things that just come to mind. And it's just like we have our own but instead of it being a film, it's just a never ending wave of introspection because our version of the Plato's Cave is individually tailored, where we are both the recipients of watching the cave, but we are also the guys behind the screen with our own torches making shapes.
That's amazing. I think we're gonna wrap it up because I have to go soon.
Sure.
But that was amazing though. I really like the films. I think it was important to explore. And finally, last word for $10. Thank you very much by Zachariah Bolduc, I think.
Oh, he's a good guy.
Yeah, thank you so much, my friend. You should watch The Good Fight. Oh my God, my mom watched a little bit of that show. It's a strangely self-aware, explicitly radically leftist. My normie friends who watch it aren't even aware that most of it is based on true events. I've heard of it. Apparently, it takes the Mariska Haggerty show. By that, I mean Law and Order SVU. It takes it up to 100, but it's more of like a lawfare thing, which I mean was originally the original show of Law and Order, as I like to call it. Law and Order. But my mother watched a bit of The Good Fight. I watched like 5 minutes of it. And I'm like,
is this a television show?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look this up for the cringe.
Maybe we should torture ourselves. Maybe it could be a Patreon thing where we torture ourselves. But
we should. We should.
And like, apparently, like Kino Casino does that, where they watch the Woke Survivors season, the current one. Maybe we should do that. We should watch.
Is that the one where they literally advertised it as a race war now type deal?
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm gonna have to. I don't watch a lot of like normie television, but for the sake of this shit, now I've got to know more. But like, it's the same reason why you can watch 5 minutes of like anything that Shonda Rhimes has ever done, and it's just like that is the eternal confession of like a black shit lib. It's just so bad. It's
disconnected from other like black people in America. Like that's how far they've gone. Like they're the average like African American, like I don't think they relate to that type. Maybe they do. I don't know. Like
because I'm sure a lot of black Americans can relate to Kerry Washington constantly on the verge of crying as she like is over a white man.
Or did you know that, speaking of Liz Bruneg, did you know the eulogy that she put out for the crime that the guy did?
No.
To get the death penalty?
No, I didn't know
She wrote this eulogy for him. He I can't even say it on YouTube, so don't worry. I'll say that.
Okay. Yeah, send it to me in a DM or something.
Yeah. But anyways, the films are great. I'm sort of pooped out after 2 hours, but there is much more to say. Maybe I'll write an article as a follow-up.
Yeah, I might do something for Doom Generation because there's a lot there.
Yeah, you should actually. So all of Prudentialist links are in the. So go and support him, subscribe. So do you have anything coming up? So this Sunday you have the
I have my show this Sunday. I'm gonna have a fishing video out tomorrow, and
Nice.
then next week, even though I'm gonna be pretty much MIA, doing some IRL stuff, caring for my friend.
Yeah.
I will be doing a reading video of my I Am 1776 article. Mark gave me the go ahead for it, so
Nice.
that'll be out next week. So, but after that, I'm gonna have just like a lot of the stuff that I'm planning to put out in my essay collection book, which will hopefully be out at the beginning of next year.
Yeah.
Those will be behind the paywall, and patrons will have access to that.
Yeah. When I put out subsequent chapters too, they'll be on my Patreon. Patreon.com/Giant Productions, Subscribestar/Prudentialist. Is that what it is?
Yeah, you can find me on Subscribestar/The or if you don't want to go through Subscribestar or YouTube, then Substack is another great way to support me.
Yeah, really great. So this has been a great episode, man. In the can. Maybe next week we might have it because you're away. You're busy. So
well, I'll find time to record something.
Yeah, and also this Saturday, I think I'm releasing the final part to the Style Talk breakdown of Obsolete by Fear Factory. So, as always, God bless. Goodbye. Too sweet.
See you, gents.
Thank you so much to the people who sneeded those super chats. So there you go.